When we're children, we're often told that all we need to succeed is to just do our best, that making the effort is what counts the most, and it's a sad day in everyone's life when we grow up and realize that's absolutely not true. Far too many video game developers have been forced to go out of business before their time for any number of reasons: mismanagement, scandal, lack of funds, the dreaded corporate restructuring, or just pure bad luck. A handful of studios, however, have had the dubious distinction of going under after releasing one of the best games of their entire career, in some cases immediately after or even technically before. Many a poet has waxed lyrical about going down in a blaze of glory, but whether that makes it better or worse is a matter of debate. Buckle up, kids. This one gets depressing! Hooray! I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 good games that couldn't save their studios. Number 10. LA Noire. Team Bondi may go down in history as a one-hit wonder, but what a hit it was. Beginning development in 2004, LA Noire wouldn't see release until 2011, following a development period that cost an estimated $50 million, making it one of the most expensive games of all time to produce. Much of that budget was devoted to developing the game's cutting-edge motion capture technology, the results of which can be seen in the incredibly fluid and lifelike facial animations in the game, although sometimes they do look a bit weird. Miraculously, such a monumental investment ended up paying dividends as the game became the breakout hit of 2011, topping charts throughout the year and garnering near-perfect scores from almost every review outlet. But the bright lights of success cast a long shadow, and reports began to circulate about the abusive and inhumane working conditions Team Bondi forced upon its employees. As a result, despite making a game that everyone on the planet seemed to be buying, Team Bondi found themselves unable to secure a publisher for future projects when no one in the industry wanted to touch them with a 10-foot pole. Out of work and burdened with the stink of misconduct, Team Bondi was liquidated in the same year LA Noire had come out. Sometimes it's a mystery why such a studio would go under, but in this case, it doesn't take a master detective to crack. Number 9. Shadow Hearts from the New World. For those not intimately familiar with the world of Japanese role-playing games, the Shadow Hearts series is a well-regarded trilogy of horror-themed RPGs with a unique pseudo-historical setting. While the first two games would become modest yet solid successes, the third installment did not fare quite so well. Shadow Hearts from the New World was hamstrung from the start by a severely truncated development period of only 1 year, far less than the 4 years its predecessor took. The developers still managed to put out a quality product regardless of this time crunch, but that quality didn't translate into sales, and less than half as many copies as the previous game were sold. Despite existing plans for another Shadow Hearts game, the development team at Nautilus was absorbed into a ruse, rebranded under a different name, and moved away from video game development entirely before being quietly dissolved. The studio may have gone out on a low note, but the Shadow Hearts series lived on through a devoted fan base, eventually leading to the original series creators to reunite for a spiritual successor project known as Penny Blood, funded through Kickstarter. It may not be the ending they hoped for, but with stories like this, happy endings of any kind are all too rare. Number 8. Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. It's tremendously sad when a studio's last game is easily their very best, and doubly sad when it was also their first game. 38 Studios was founded by retired baseball legend Curt Schilling and named after his jersey number from his days as a player. Mr. Schilling had big dreams for his fledgling venture, wanting to create a whole new fantasy franchise headlined by an MMORPG known by the working title of Project Copernicus, but before the studio could make a game that big, they decided to make something smaller to introduce this epic new world. Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning brought together something of a dream team. Fantasy novelist R.A. Salvatore, Elder Scrolls designer Ken Rolston, character designer Todd McFarlane, and composer Grant Kirkhope all lent their talents to the project. The game was well received, being hailed as one of the best games of 2012 and praised for its combat, storytelling, and world design. The game also sold quite well, exceeding the estimates of its publisher Electronic Arts, but unfortunately good wasn't good enough. Due to inflated budgets and numerous loans that needed to be repaid, 38 Studios failed to turn a profit on Kingdoms of Amalur and had to close their doors before they could even finish patching the game. A true reckoning indeed. Number 7. Prototype 2. Once upon a time, Radical Entertainment was a lovely place to work. It was well regarded within the gaming industry not just for its work, but for its corporate policies like generous maternity leave and allowing employees to retain the copyright of any ideas they created for the company. Radical's swan song, Prototype 2, is a bit of an anomaly on this list because nothing really went wrong. Development proceeded on track, it released on time, and it was a pretty darned fun game. It reviewed and sold well, becoming the top-selling game during its month of release and staying at or near the top of the charts for weeks after. So, what was the problem? Well, while Prototype 2 was a bestseller at the time it came out, game sales in general were down from the previous year, and as a result, the game failed to meet sales expectations, and Radical's parent company Activision laid off a majority of the studio's staff and cancelled all projects in development. While Radical was never officially shut down, it had its staff reduced from over 200 employees down to just 6 and was moved into an auxiliary role, providing support for other studios but never taking the lead on a project again. The company may be alive in name, but there's nothing radical about that situation. Number 6. Drive Club. Despite being a racing game all about going as fast as possible, Drive Club ironically had a very slow start. After originally being announced as a planned launch title for the PS4, the game suffered a number of delays and didn't launch until the following year. Reviews upon release were mixed, praising the visuals and game feel while also criticizing the buggy AI, missing features and dodgy online. The developers at Evolution Studios took this feedback in stride and set to work making new content for the game. Through a combination of free updates and paid DLC, Drive Club was gradually improved with the addition of more tracks, more modes, and more everything, really, to the point that some reviewers revised their original score for the game in light of how far it had come. Sadly, there was no time for a victory lap, as Evolution Studios was shut down by Sony in March of 2016, the very same day they released their final DLC pack for the game, simply titled Finish Line. Reacting to the news, many blamed the game's initially lukewarm reception for giving the studio an unfair reputation it could never shake off. Though now considered a classic and one of the best-selling PS4 games, Drive Club is a cautionary tale of how you can never underestimate the power of a first impression. Number 5. James Bond 007 Bloodstone. Across their 23 years in the industry, British game studio Bizarre Creations had a handful of hits spread mainly across 2 different genres, shooters and racing games. And what do you get when you combine shooting and driving fancy cars? James Bond, of course. Taking advantage of a gap between movies, Bizarre Creations was given free rein to make an original entry in the Bond universe, a tantalizing proposition indeed. James Bond 007 Bloodstone aimed to cover the whole breadth of the spy genre with gunplay, fistfights, high-speed car chases, and just a dash of stealth. Even with all the set pieces seemingly in place, however, Bloodstone released to middling reviews and sluggish sales, probably not helped by the fact that a second Bond game, a remake of the beloved classic GoldenEye, released on the exact same day. Players would eventually come around on the game, and retrospective reviews in later years have often cited Bloodstone as one of the best Bond games of all time. Bizarre Creations would sadly not stick around long enough to be vindicated though, as their parent company Activision, boo, announced plans to downsize or sell off the studio before deciding to close it completely just 2 months after Bloodstone's release. Between this and Prototype 2, it seems that working for Activision is like trying to get blood from a stone. Little joke there because this is a sad list. Number 4. The Saboteur. Pandemic Studios had a rather impressive track record to their name. They were the creators of the Mercenaries and Destroy All Humans franchises, as well as developing the original Star Wars Battlefront games, but sadly, all good things must come to an end. Pandemic's swan song was not in any established franchise, but a wholly original IP called The Saboteur, a historical stealth game set in World War II era France. The game was good, with review scores generally hovering around 7s and 8s, though it did have its share of issues as many players felt the game could have used a bit more polish. Unfortunately, that may have been difficult, as Pandemic Studios was shut down in November of 2009, a month before The Saboteur was actually released. There was no formal reason given for the studio's dissolution, though it had been hit hard by layoffs from its parent company, EA. The Saboteur might have been a case of too little, too late, coming on the heels of expensive losses like a cancelled Batman movie tie-in game that may have doomed Pandemic in the eyes of the higher-ups. Whatever the reason might have been, Pandemic Studios surely deserves a second chance. Number 3. Split Second Velocity. The tale of BlackRock Studios is a sad one, and one that's becoming all too common in the industry today. Before becoming a subsidiary of Disney Interactive, BlackRock developed quite the extensive portfolio of racing games, dipping their toes into everything from motorcycles to ATVs to Hot Wheels of all things. But of course, their specialty was cars, and they put that specialty on display to the best of their ability with their final game, Split Second. Far from being just a simple racing game, Split Second was all about power plays, show-stopping moves that let players blow the competition away or even reshape the entire racetrack to give themselves an advantage. The game was great fun for those who played it, but those were all too few as the game unfortunately sold like whatever the opposite of hotcakes are. Cold pies? Cold pies are delicious though. BlackRock tried to stave off the inevitable by pitching a sequel to the game, but in light of the poor sales, Disney decided to pull the plug on the studio as they planned to focus on free-to-play content for their gaming future. It's a crying shame that a studio with so much talent wasn't able to cross the finish line. Number 2. Thief 2: The Metal Age. The first game in the Thief series was a landmark title for the stealth genre, introducing concepts that are now standard for such games, like the use of light, darkness, and sound as elements that affect your sneaking ability. It's a small wonder that a game so revolutionary would get a sequel, but it's a very big wonder that the sequel turned out as good as it did. Thief 2 managed to outperform its predecessor both critically and commercially, with critics lauding it for improving on its predecessor in every way. What many didn't know was that the Thief 2 that reached store shelves was in many ways a compromised product. Looking Glass, the series developers, were in dire financial straits during the last stages of development, to the point that staff members were eschewing things like sleeping and bathing just to make sure that the game was finished on time. One would hope that such hard work and sacrifice would be rewarded, but despite the game's strong sales, Looking Glass wasn't due to receive any royalty payments until months later. With few options and plans for a buyout falling through, Looking Glass was forced to shut down. Now that one's just plain unfair. Number 1. Mario & Luigi: Bowser's Inside Story. Saying that you developed one of the best-selling entries in one of the most popular franchises of all time is quite the claim, but it's an accolade that belongs to Alpha Dream, a studio that specialized in quirky role-playing games. Their biggest claim to fame was the Mario & Luigi franchise, an RPG series starring the titular mustachioed brothers. The series was a hit right from the start, but its third entry, Bowser's Inside Story, was widely considered the best and most commercially successful of the bunch. Remaking the game for its 10th anniversary seemed like a slam dunk idea. Alpha Dream had already made Mario & Luigi games for the 3DS and thus possessed the know-how and assets to get it done, and it came out as a perfectly good remake of an already excellent game. So what went wrong? Well, most likely it was their decision to release the game for the 3DS in 2019, a full 2 years after its successor, the Switch, had already been launched. Sales were utterly abysmal, roughly on par with those of the Virtual Boy, a comparison that no video game would ever want to be on the receiving end of. With their last big game being an abject failure, Alpha Dream was forced to file for bankruptcy, and they would be outlived by their own series as a new Mario & Luigi game would be announced in 2024, proving that some dreams never die.